Hey everyone, I'm Maggie Lake. With me today, I am lucky to have two friends and market veterans who are going to share some stories from the floor, Lance Harvey and Kevin Cooke. Hi guys.
What's going
Hi,
on, Maggie?
Maggie.
How are you?
I'm doing well. So I'm going to talk to both of you about your background, what you're doing now, and just some of your experiences. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a second to give everybody a little context about why I'm excited to have you both on the show and why I really wanted to do that. So I talk to people in finance all the time, every day for my shows, fund managers, economists, strategists. And one of the things I've noticed over the years is that anyone who's worked on a trading floor, especially an open outcry or an exchange back in the day, they just seem to have a special sense of how markets move. They often see things, see patterns, pick up signals or sentiment or something in a way other people just don't. Like I call it their spidey sense sometimes. And I feel like that kind of institutional knowledge is fading a little bit as everything goes electronic. I mean, there are some people who are working in the business who've never experienced anything but sitting basically alone in front of their computer. Does it feel that way to you guys, Lance?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely on the trading floor, you definitely had a better vibe of what was going on around you. I mean, there was a certain roar to the trading floor too, right? Kind of correct, film, back me here when news would come out or all of a sudden the floor would start to get loud. You just, I don't know, there was like you were saying, Maggie, that spidey sense of what was going on. It's not like we had any more information. We had just what everybody else had, but you just had like an overall feel of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think it was inherent on a trading floor or an exchange floor that, it was just part and parcel of what we did every day. You had to know kind of like where people's sentiment was, where the market felt like it was going. And listen, sometimes we got it wrong, right? But, there was definitely points where you could just feel a buzz on the floor even before something like kind of broke. I still remember, Lance, like days where like, and they used to do this more than they do it now. Like now everything's so telegraphed and everything's so kind of planned out. Like right now, right? We're talking about rate cuts and basically everyone knows there's going to be a rate cut. It's just a
Right.
matter now of whether you think it's going to be a 25 basis or a 50 basis rate cut, right? But like back in the day, like people forget, like they used to do surprise rate cuts and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or like
Surprise
surprise rate
news.
hikes. And like you would just all of a sudden, like, especially where we sat on the, specialist side of the New York Stock Exchange. So we sat on the market making side. So like we would see like the orders flow and like you would almost see it like in the order flow before it even like hit the tape. And, you'd have this rush of activity that would just start kind of commencing. And it was like, then all of a sudden, like the volume on the floor would go from a din to like a roar, like Lance was saying. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think it also, being kind of somebody that had to be tied to markets and kind of would always have to read, and stay on top of certain industries, you do have that kind of innate sense of kind of where we're going, where we've been, and, like what stage of the market. You always want to know what stage of the market. Are we still going up? Do we feel like we're topping off? Does it feel like it's bottoming out? And again, we weren't always right, but you were certainly always thinking in those kind of, in that kind of terminology and that kind of thought.
Yeah. A little bit earlier down the food chain, it seemed like I remember at the very end. So I want to hear how you guys got on the floor, but I actually also spent the early part of my career on the floor reporting when it was wild. And it was exactly as you're describing. And I remember at the end, someone saying to me, like, before we used to be able to see that, what post was busy, what was happening, and things would pick up. Now things just come out of a black box at us, because so much of it is algo driven and coming from, electronic trading. And so it's just really interesting. And that was still when there were people on the floor. But let's back up a sec. So Lance, now you both worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. You're both out of that business now. Lance, you own and operate Surf Pro franchises. Kevin, you're an executive in the sales executive in the mortgage industry. But how did you both end up working on the floor? So, like, what was the journey that got you there? How did that start? Lance, how did you end up there? Did you want to be in finance?
Well, my family was always on the trading floors prior to me. My uncle Rick owned a firm called Harvey and Kevin Cooke. He had a specialist business and a $2 business on the Amex, and he had a $2 business on the New York. So, he was down there for years, my uncle, and he offered me a job at a family wedding when I was like 20 years old. I was basically like working for my parents. My family was, they owned a bar, grill, they owned a deli, and I was like banging around my parents' family business. And my uncle basically said to me, he's like, what are you going to do? You going to work in a deli all life? What do you want to do? You want to give this thing a run? I said, sure, I'd love to see what's going on. He said, come down and meet me on the Amex. And he actually got me a job starting on the New York for one of his partners who used to be a specialist at a firm called MJ Mean.
So I'm laughing because, when I said I invited friends on, this is casual, right? Kevin's got a worker at his house. He just had to blank out the camera and go talk to this guy. This is what we do. The masters of multitasking. And you know that too, Lance, right?
Yeah, it's just the way it is. Tell me if sorry, I have some noise in the background.
That's okay. So Lance is at his workplace now. And I'm just going to say, because I know some of you are going to put this in the comments, we know Lance's audio is a little low. I know a lot of you really care about that. So do we. But these are busy people. We got to take them where we can get them. And so
is it that bad, huh?
It's not that it's that bad, Lance, but we'll get him a microphone next time. We'll get him a proper microphone next time.
Because I've been doing a couple more of these things.
So Lance, so you go from sort of working in a family business and you take this job. What?
No idea of finance, right? Nothing.
Which is incredible.
I basically was put behind a trading post. I worked for a specialist firm, market makers. Started out at a mean salary of $16,700 a year. I was like, oh my God. And then I was traveling from Long Island. I born and raised in Huntington, Long Island. So I was going from Long Island to downtown. So that basically took like a third of my take-home pay to get in and out of the city.
What do you remember what you first thought when you walked onto the trading floor? Because they were wild places back then.
So I went to the Amex to meet my uncle, and it was pretty wild. And on the Amex, they actually traded. It was like set up differently the way the New York was set up, where the specialists and the clerks were right next to each other. Where on the New York, specialist was on the outside of the ring. They called it like a post. A little bit different setup, but it was still open outcry there then, and it was wild. I couldn't believe what I walked into. It was overwhelming. I mean, so many people all over the place, loud. I'm trying to talk to my uncle. He's trying to show me. He's showing me the dot system. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell this is. And that's, Kevin will understand the way the dot system back then was. It was the opposite, right? It was the way they didn't go from high to low. It went from low to high to low, right, Kev? Remember like the way the stops used to hit? Everything was backward. And still a lot of paper. So you had paper.
It was all paper. Yeah. Not all paper, but yeah. So you had the machines shooting out the cards, right?
Yeah, the dot cards in the back. And then we walked over to the New York. And then when we walked over to New York, I was even more overwhelmed because it was even bigger and louder. Like you walked into the lobby of the New York, you could hear it from on 11 Wall.
Yeah.
As soon as you walked in that lobby, you heard it. It was wild.
Kevin, how did you end up working on the floor?
I mean, almost a little similar. I mean, back then it was like who you knew and how you got there, right? So like I was lucky enough. I had a cousin who was working at one of the big sell side desks, and I had always been fascinated by Wall Street and with stock trading and everything like that. Would read everything about like Michael Milken and was obsessed with the movie Wall Street and all that, right? So like as I was finishing college, I knew I wanted to do something in finance. I had a finance degree and I was definitely interested in doing something in finance. And so I reached out to my cousin and I was like, well, what kind of advice? What do you think? And he said, listen, the best place to go to learn this business is right where it happens. Go to the point of sale, go get down on the floor, kind of figure it out from there and see if you can build a career from there. So I did, and he introduced me to this guy who was running the floor for this shop, and I'll never forget the first time walking down there, and same thing as Lance, like you walked into that I remember just coming through those double doors by right off 11 Wall there, and it was just like, wow, you just got hit in the face with sound and the fury of it all. And it took a little time for me to like hook up with a job. And what he did was, I remember it was so clear as day too. My cousin like had kind of warned me. He's like, listen, don't talk about your resume. Don't talk about the fact that you were finance student of the year or that, you won some stock trading contest in college. Nobody cares. Like, he's gonna, just be ready for, this guy's gonna be more about your wit and your personality than he is about your resume, And sure enough, right as I got down there, he's asking me about, what was your summer like? What'd you do? Did you do anything fun? I told him I'd gone away and like did like a college Europe trip, and he's asking me like what countries I met girls from and stuff like that, like really like had nothing to do with anything else about my finance degree,
He wants to see if you're a guy. He wants to see if you're a guy's guy.
And brought me up to the luncheon club. I remember being like, wow, this is so cool, And I like had to like go hang out in their booth for like a few months, like unpaid. I would just get on the train in the morning from Long Island, similar to Lance. I grew up on Long Island. I think Lance and I bonded over a lot of that same stuff. Both of our dads were cops. Both of our dads had side businesses. We both grew up on Long Island, similar backgrounds. And I would just show up every day so the guy wouldn't forget about me. And then luckily that summer, he hooked me up with a summer internship at the specialist firm that Lance was working at. And, I was lucky enough to kind of parlay that into a full-time job that fall. And, never left that firm. I stayed at that firm right until the day I left.
Same with me.
It's
Never
crazy.
left that firm. We got taken over twice.
There was a lot of, so you were you were there in the sort of, I don't know if it's fair to say the heyday really, because there were a lot of big changes coming, but it was probably the peak, right, of the New York Stock Exchange.
I went down in December of 92 to visit my uncle. I basically started working in January of 93. So you still had open outcry. We were trading in eighths back then. So,
yeah, no decimals.
No decimals, trading in eighths. It was paper book and electronic book, the dot system. So I mean, it was wild. It was fast and furious.
Yeah, and I was a few years later. I was 96, so the fall of 96, I started full time. I think it probably was the peak as far as, I think a few years later was the peak as far as number of people on the floor, how much the seats were going for, the seat license pricing was way up a couple of years later. And I think too, I remember back, Lance, I mean, like, remember like when we were going from eighths to 16ths, there was this big fear amongst all the market participants that, it was going to lead to all this, picking off or, somebody's just going to come in and now if they want to buy ahead of me, they only have to go up to 16th. And, there was all this kind of consternation around like what the effect of going to 16th would have on the overall market. But you look back and it was amazing because basically it just brought in this big influx of liquidity and volumes just never looked back. The volume on the trading floor started just going up incrementally every year after that. And it really was probably the heyday of kind of the floor because the algorithms hadn't really taken over yet. And we were probably operating at kind of max efficiency as far as, the electronic and the outcry kind of hybrid, approach.
Yeah. Do you like the intensity you're talking about? So when I first started going down there, I couldn't believe, because we were reporting from the floor, right? Not everybody had fancy booths back then and stuff, but the sort of media was starting to come into the floor. Yeah. I was young, and the army of people running full speed through that floor all the time. We used to joke that I think they maybe were trying to knock us over because not everybody was happy we were there. The saying, at the end of the night, there were just mountains of paper, but there was so much activity. I mean, the intensity was kind of crazy. How did you deal with that every day? I mean, was it like, did it kind of fuel you, or was it taxing? Like, how did you manage through that? It seems like a shark pool.
You had to I don't know how you say, like you had to go into your own zone. You could hear everything around you, but take for instance, when you were a frontline clerk, you were the specialist assistant. I think that at times was a lot more stressful than being a specialist, because you had to actually listen to your crowd, listen to your specialist, listen to your clerk behind you, listen to the people behind you, behind your backup clerk. Maybe they put an order in wrong, or where is this? Did this order go in? So you're listening to that. And then meanwhile, you have your specialist right next to you. He's barking trades at you, telling you to change a quote, telling you to switch stocks. I mean, you would just stay in zone, and you heard everything. It was an amazing skill set that I think that everybody picked up on for the most part, at least.
But it was also, I think it was also the ultimate kind of, evolutionary, sink or swim, right? Like, it was all that, everything Lance said is 100% accurate. Like, you had to basically be that person that, managed and remembered everything, because somebody would come by and they'd be like, hey, I'm a figure top. I got 10,000 to buy. And they'd walk out of the crowd. And then, you'd be sitting there and it wouldn't be trading at a figure top, it wouldn't be trading at the number, and then they'd walk away, and then you'd have to remind your specialist, like, hey, remember, Joe Blow came by, he said he's a figure top buyer, that kind of stuff, and it'd be like, so you had to remember everything that everybody was saying. It was such a skill for like listening and stuff where you couldn't miss a beat, you had to be able to be fast on your feet. You had to be able to survive and kind of thrive in high pressure situations. And, the fact of the matter is not everybody was made out for it. Not everybody was cut out for it. There were guys that would just be a deer in headlights. The pressure would ramp and the stock would start getting active and people would start flooding up in front of them. And you would see clerks just basically shut down. Like they just drowning. And specialists too.
Come right in. They'd be like,
they would just get run over. They basically like take you by your collar and be like, all right, buddy, thanks. We're gonna get some reinforcements in here for this situation,
It reminds me when they took him out on the stretcher at Trading Places, right?
Yeah.
Like
100%. Yeah, 100%. Get back in there and sell, Did
you guys ever feel like that? Did you ever feel like, holy shit, I'm just going to, like, I can't, I
think Kevin and I always fought through it. I never got pulled out of a spot.
I will say, I still remember one situation where, like, I had just started coming into my own as a frontline clerk, and I was aggressive. I wanted to be in those high pressure situations. I wanted to be at the busiest panels. And the way you would work is before you were trusted to be kind of the frontline clerk of like a big stock, you would have to start by kind of filling in for the guys who were the frontline clerks in the big stocks, So like they would basically be able to test you out. And I remember like it was when I was first getting into like, busier panels and busier stocks. And I was still pretty green. Like, there's no two bones about it. I was still pretty green.
You can say his name because somebody like, "Were you working with Sikorsky?"
Yeah, well, but then I remember like I'd been working with Johnny and everything was and I was kind of proving myself, and we got into some hairy situations, and and he was a wild man, and it was all good. But then I remember I was putting like Citibank. And like this news comes out. It was like right around that same time when like long-term capital and all this stuff was like hitting the tape. And the
long-term capital, for those who don't remember, because maybe some people listening, is a hedge fund that blew up and really almost took the financial system down with it. A lot of cross-party exposure, and that was a big deal. It was one of the
late 90s, right? It was like 98 or something like that. So it's probably on the floor a couple of years, and this stock just goes parabolic. I mean, like. Market, like everyone just kind of rushes in, and Jimmy was trading the stock at the time, and it was just wild. Jimmy McDevitt, and like this thing just goes on like a rocket ship, and like there was a guy sitting right behind me, like literally with his hand on my shoulder, ready to pull me out of the stock because like this is the first time I'm like really in the shit, like, and I'm like I got it, and Jimmy, I love him for it to this day. It was like. Leave him in. He's doing great. He's right there. He's right with me. But then eventually it just got so loud and so crazy. And like we had to like halt it and then they were like, all right, dude, great job. You hung in long enough.
Yeah, I remember that because I was with Bobby Hardy trading like Alcatel at the time.
Yeah, it was right over that same. Yeah. It was wild. And like, but that's the stuff like, to this day, it's like one of those proud moments where it was like, you know what? Like, and then it proves to yourself, like, yeah, I'm ready to do this. Like, I'm ready to go to that next level. And it's those things that happen in your career. And like, and what's amazing too is I think back on the floor and, just look back on it with so much gratitude and so much appreciation because really felt like the place was the best place ever. And, would have loved to spend a whole career down there. I don't want to speak for Lance, but that's the way I feel personally.
That's how I felt too. I wanted that place to last forever.
And it's amazing to think back, like, we were in our late 20s, like ascending to this position of kind of, the next man up kind of approach. And it was like, you were entrusted with a lot of responsibility. I think that was never lost on the people on the floor, like we were given a lot of responsibility, like the fact of the matter was they used to say it all the time, like the eyes of the world are on the New York Stock Exchange,
Yep.
Sometimes we were probably trading 80-90% of the volume of all equity markets in those names, So it was like, well, if we printed something wrong, or if we closed the stock at the wrong price, it's literally going to dislocate markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like there was a lot of responsibility, but with that came a lot of like, just self-confidence and the ability to kind of be there in the moment, and delivering. It was amazing.
Well, you're like operating in the storm, I mean, it's like very sort of superhero-esque because that when you had big market days like that, it was real. You guys were making the market. I mean, you were, there were humans doing that at that time. And yeah, the consequences were huge. But when you're managing that, it's I can only imagine once you've done that, you can probably do anything. I mean, really, I can't think of a more stressful situation. It sounds like there was I don't want to say no room for error, but like weakness wasn't tolerated, it sounds like.
Well, the problem was we had these trades called QTs, question trades. So then the next day, the guys downstairs would come up and they'd say, we got a problem on, 2,000 shares or 5,000 shares. Okay, you got to buy 2,000 shares up $3. Thanks. I just lost $6,000 on that. I appreciate it. Or how about you got to sell 20 down $2? Oh, there's 40 grand out the window. And then your specialist was very excited with you the rest of the day. Meanwhile, right? And you just had to sit there and take it, and you didn't complain. You just put your head back down and you just worked.
Yeah. I think that what you're just describing, though, is a really good example of sort of understanding the sort of ebbs and flows of a market, right? It was happening sort of in front of your eyes and you could see it on the floor, including like what was hot, right? I remember somebody that I talked to often, Mish, who worked on the commodity floor for a long time, said you'd trade what was hot, right? Like you could see it was all in oil, and then you'd start to see literally physically the action moving to a different post. So you could tell the flows or all of the sort of, forward momentum was happening someplace else. You could actually see that back then. It sounds like you guys could see when things were really blowing up, if that happened in finance and city or someplace else. Lance, did you do semis? Were you doing semis for a while?
Yeah, my last two stocks I traded, because they called them panels, I was trading National Semiconductor and Harris. And Kevin and I had the enjoyment of doing a private equity takeover of Harris.
Oh, yeah.
That was a rough one.
I
think that's what retired me.
That was a rough one. Yeah.
How so?
Well, the news came out that private equity was taking over Harris. So we opened the stock up like $10 and we avoided disaster and we opened it up, and then, 60 guys are in your crowd screaming that the rumor is true, the rumor's not true, the rumor's true, it's going through it. Then it wasn't. And now we had the stock up, we let it rip, and we started buying it, going with the flow. News comes out, nope, no deal. And immediately down. And I think in 2 hours, I lost like $500,000 or something. Like something ridiculous. And I mean, I don't think
it was quite that bad. It might have only been like 300, but
no, it was because. Well, actually, you know what? I think
you made a lot of it back. You eventually made a lot of it back.
350, and then the next day I lost another because we held the position. So it beat me up. It was a good half a stick beating over the course of that week. But then we traded out of it. It took us like 2 months to trade out of it. We got it back. We made money on it, but you want to talk about an ugly feeling of losing? Like your whole body is just hot and numb.
At the same time.
At the same time. You know, like you just like, And you immediately say, make a market. So I keep going. You're just looking over, and then, powers that be are sniffing around your spot. Your bosses are asking questions. And that was probably my hairiest moment on the floor.
Yeah, it's like, it's those moments too. It's funny. It's like you hear people talk about this in other walks of life too, and it's amazing. It's like sometimes you remember the mistakes more than you remember the good trades, because there was plenty of days where Lance, made multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars trading, but what does he bring up first? The big loss, like the tough day,
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too. It's like, I swear I remember, and I remember that day almost as bad as I remember any of the days that I lost in my own book, because I was sitting there trying to support my friend and help him out. And instead we wound up just eating a bad one, So yeah, it's crazy though how those are the ones that
stick. But then there is the good ones too, like you said. Those days where you could just chip and chip and chip and chip, and big news was out, and you avoided so much disaster, but you just stayed so nimble and just in and out, made a market. Everybody was happy.
But you know why you remember, and it is absolutely true, wrapped up a series called My Life in 4 Trades, where people talked about their 2 best trades and their 2 worst trades. Absolutely, without exception, everybody spent more time and were way more invested talking about their worst trades, even though they'd had huge success. Right. I mean, some of them are, because that's where all the learning comes from, right? Like that's where first of all, if you survive it, that's where resilience comes from. But also you take away a lot from those. That's why they stick with you, I think, Kev, what was your worst day? Did you have one that's kind of sticks in your mind?
I mean, literally, like when people ask me what my worst day is, I do mention the Harris.
It was Lance's worst day.
Well, because like at the time, like I had been trusted to be kind of like a post kind of leader, and like so like I was in there like in a leadership position, but at the same time kind of helping Lance. And I just remember like we knew it immediately. We knew we made a mistake. Like, there was a sale to be made. We passed on the sale, and then we had to make a market the whole way down. So, like, I think that's also something that's lost, Maggie. And I'm not trying to avoid your question about my biggest loss, because I did have a couple of nasty ones. But like, I think it was like, what we were responsible for was really making a market. And so like we had all these rules that we had to abide by as far as like how much liquidity we needed to put into a market based off of, the price of the stock, how much average daily volume there was, and stuff like that. So we were always getting graded kind of on like our ability. Yeah, we had guidelines that we had to meet and follow. And so like, there was times when like you'd be in a nasty situation, the stock would be coming against you, and you'd go to, ask for, leniency to kind of extend the guidelines and stuff, just because you couldn't just sit there and buy it with no, nobody wants to catch a falling knife, right? But like, yeah, I had a couple of those too. And I traded Goldman Sachs at the end of my career, and Goldman was always a pretty wild stock. It was, $100 plus stock for most of the time that I had it. And, it kind of made this parabolic move. And I look back on it, and I was definitely a little stubborn on the short side at times. Like I would just be like, I can't keep going up. And so yeah, there was a couple of days there where I just remember wishing I had a do-over to say, like, just go with the flow, Cook, like just get out of the way and let the thing go where it needed to go.
That comes up, by the way, all the time. We get questions. So some of the shows I do are live, and people can sort of, ask questions. One of the hardest things, we've done education as well. One of the hardest things is people always want to know, when do I get out? When do I buy? When do I get out? When do I buy? The timing is so hard, obviously, right? Like none of us have a crystal ball. But one of the things that people struggle with, Kevin, is getting out too early or not letting the winners ride. But it's hard because you could also be in Lance's position. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem, is that for every time you don't do that, there's a cautionary tale of when you got a little greedy or out over your skis. How do you guys balance that?
I mean, listen, I think it's tough. And I'll be honest, like since I've left the floor, there's been a couple of times, like certainly like the most recent one was probably during COVID, where I restarted an E-Trade account and tried to like, put some of my money over there and like, let me go play with it again. Like, and you kind of feel like you're back there and like you're in it. And the problem is though, like, I don't know, Lance, if you've done the same,
I
but
day
like,
traded. I day
yeah,
traded
but
like
for
3
me,
months. It was
it's like
awful.
my brain is still broken in that, like, I can't, you know, like, I'm always thinking of the out, you know, like, I'm just always thinking of the out, you know, so like, I bought some stocks really intelligently, like in COVID,
Yep.
that like I just couldn't sit like that's why like I had to stop trading. Like I basically like 6 months later, 8 months later, I'm like, you know what? I gotta get out of this thing because I should have just ruined all of them and not thought of it. But instead, I'm trading out of one, I'm buying another. I even was like starting to short some things, like you know, and I was like, well, what am I doing? Like I have a full-time job. I can't just sit here and do this, you know. So like I've gone back to just like trusting a market professional, and yeah, I weigh in on it. We talk and like. But like I'm just as guilty as anybody as far as like selling too soon or not holding on to those winners. It's you know it's a mentality.
Well, it's a mentality because we just had to get out of our head like, all right, I'm making this investment. I'm leaving it. If I have a 5-year game plan, 10-year game plan, just leave it alone. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. It's going to move all over the place. But as a trader, you're looking at this thing, and then you're on your technical analysis, and
Yeah,
you're doing all you
yeah.
check. Well, here's the top right here. I should get out of it right here. And then that's just the way it is. That's the way it is.
Well, that was us, Maggie, right? Like we had fundamental analysts and we always needed to be aware of the fundamentals, but like give us a good chart to analyze, you know, we would have you would have thought we were solving world's problems on the chart. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah, I should sell it here. It says on the chart. Yeah, but there's 3 buyers in the crowd. Why are you selling it?
Well,
yeah, right, exactly.
so that's another really interesting. So two interesting things from that I think do highlight a lot of the things people struggle with. They are addicted to action, right? Like trading just to trade, as opposed to being able to just sit there and let things sort of play out. That's really hard. People get in and out so much. And then the other thing is kind of relying on one framework, right? And I think you're right, because that's the other thing I see all the time. People are like, yeah, there's the narrative is what people like to refer to it now, right? The fundamental story, but I'm looking at the chart and I don't like what I see on the chart. But you kind of have to do all of them, right? If you just look at the chart, but there are no buyers and it doesn't matter. People say the same thing now. Well, it's really cheap. Okay. It's really cheap. Is that a reason to buy it?
Yeah. Or does that mean everyone no?
Or just it mean that nobody wants it for a reason? Right. Exactly. So it's sort of interesting that sort of you guys also still struggle with that, even though you have all this experience on the floor, or maybe because of it.
I think it's even because of it, right? Like we were told it was beat into our heads, you know, that we were in the moving business, we weren't in the storage
We're
business.
not in the storage business. Oh, we're investing. You have a bad position, a long position. Remember some of the senior guys that come over and go, "Oh, we're investors now, huh?"
Yeah.
Well,
Like
no, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. Okay.
Yeah.
So far, it isn't.
I still remember, like I had just just gotten my badge, and well, not just, I'd been out for a little while, but I was starting to get moved around into some busier stock situations.
We get not to cut you off, Kevin, but when he's saying get your badge, Maggie, when you go from clerk to broker, you got your seat, you got your badge.
Oh,
That's that. You had your numbered badge, and now you were a part of, you were a member of the New York Stock Exchange.
A big deal, which is a big deal.
It was a big deal. I mean, and especially when we got our seats on the floor, you know, they were worth a lot of money, and your company, you know, giving you that badge number to kind of represent them in their seat, you know, that meant a lot. And you know, what was it, Lance? It was 1,366, right?
1,366 seats. You would sign
the finite number.
And when you signed, our firm leased my seat. They didn't actually own my seat. So they would lease it from somebody that owned it. And the family that owned the seat owned it for like 75 years or something.
Isn't that amazing?
Something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And when I signed this, I'm like, oh my God, look at it. I mean, this family's had this thing forever.
Yeah, because like, you know, our firm, when we were specialists, and, you know, again, talking about how it was at the height, and what do we have, Lance? We had like 80 something specialists?
85 specialists at the height. We had 85 specialists, and I think we had like 15 floating specialists all in.
Well, yeah, I think the 85 included them, but like, yeah, we had like, yeah, we probably had like 60 panels and like 85 specialists or something like that, 65, whatever it was. And, you know, like another 300 and something clerks, you know, so it's like
450 stocks, right? And we have something like that, 450 issues.
Yeah, I think people don't even remember there was that. I mean, they see a little bit in the movies, and of course, there still is the movie set, which is New York Stock Exchange, and nothing goes on there, except for like the first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But people forget really like how much flowed through that place. What was the craziest day? I mean, I know there were a lot because Lance and I hang out. I hear these stories. His wife is one of my besties, so I get to hear a little of these stories. But what was one of your craziest days? And because I hear them, Lance, like what that you can say on air, as I know there are a lot. I can't get kicked off YouTube.
For trading reasons, I would say, Kevin, we did the reweighting. And we did the reweighting. We had like 6 stocks that were going. 3 were going in, 3 were coming out.
Yeah,
right?
That was a wild day. Yeah,
that was a wild day, right? They took all the ADR stocks, so like your Alcans, your Alcatels, they all came out of. It was the Russell 2000?
Yeah, it was one of those. It was one of those like triple days or something where they would.
Right.
There was new stocks going into the Dow, coming out of the Dow.
Yes.
Going into the S&P 500, coming out of the S&P 500. And like we had like a number of stocks affected on the same day. So like literally it was like
it was insane.
It was insanity. That was the crazy day. I mean, there's some like I remember as a clerk, one of the craziest days was definitely like we started talking about earlier, that long-term capital. Remember there was also like the Asian
currency crisis.
The Asian currency crisis was right around there. Those were crazy days. What was that?
They had the London bombing. That was right after 9/11.
Well, even like, the reopen after 9/11 was wild. Like that was, you talk about a day where you were proud to be there and proud to be a member of that community, or part of that community. But like, that was a stressful day, Like,
I didn't realize that you guys were both still down there during that time.
Oh yeah. Like nobody knew what was going to happen coming out of that, that day. And so like, and it was also like you would keep it in perspective, obviously, just because of everything that had happened. But
I remember. So it's funny. So we were all at the floor at the same time because I was doing a show up on the platform where the old bell was. And we were ready to go on air.
Yeah.
When that happened. So, and I remember that, and I remember how hard everyone worked to try to get that reopened as quickly as possible. That was like, It was like, there's no one that thought that they were going to be able to, I think it was 3 days maybe, but nobody thought it was really possible.
It was a Tuesday when it happened, and then we opened that following Monday. We rolled back there that following Monday and walking through, the scariest situation, right?
Like, smell it on the trading floor. You could smell it on the floor still.
Yeah, for a long time. For a long time. Yeah. But I know people hadn't slept for days trying to work to get that open. That was.
Yep. And even that day, like we were under a lot of pressure as specialists to get the stocks open as fast as possible too, because they didn't want you to like wait until 10 o'clock to open stocks. It was like one of those things where like, hey, get in early, figure out, where you're at, and like let's try to open this thing and give people back access to the liquidity of the market as soon as possible.
Yeah, it showed that it's working, right?
Showed that it's working 100%.
Yeah.
They actually brought the American Stock Exchange over to the New York Stock Exchange because they just couldn't open up the Amex because it was just.
I still don't know how they were able to get the comms up in order to do that. I know people were sharing space and all sorts of resources, and it was just everybody pitching in. But it was still unbelievable to me now, based on what happened, that they were able to get all those comms up and running that were needed to operate the markets. And so I think a lot of people were not sure that they could open, to your point, Kevin. So they really wanted to show that.
Yeah, it was a wild day. It was a crazy time to be down there. But I think, and then, you think about other like busy days, a lot of them were around those events though, as far as, well, the big macro events were one thing, but then the other ones that you would be in a very specific stock that was going to go through a specific reweighting or a secondary offering, something like that. And those were wild situations because like the volume would literally go up like 5-10x in a single day. And yeah, I still remember a couple of those. A couple of the IPOs that I worked were also pretty hairy and wild. So those were the days that you walked out of there, man. You felt like, you felt like you felt like that day went by in a minute, 100%. Exactly what I was going to say. Like it literally, you snapped your fingers and the day was over. and you were drenched and like you barely ate and you barely drank anything all day, and you just walked out of there on such a like a high. You'd walk out of there on a high of just like exhilaration and dopamine, I guess.
And you hit the Long Island Railroad and immediately fall asleep.
Or
Or I was going to say,
or
do
make your
something
way
else.
out. Or make your way to the nearest watering, or make your way to the nearest watering hole and have your second drink by 4:30.
I was going to say, I was in a couple of those. That adrenaline was going someplace. Absolutely. You had to replenish, right?
Or be at Wall Street Kitchen by 4:30 and 2 cocktails.
Well, it was like work hard, play hard, right? That was the kind of
Thursday morning. You could literally. It was such a joke. Like you'd go around on Thursday mornings, like anybody going out tonight? Anybody? Everyone would be like, nah, I'm good. No, not tonight, man. Nah, I got stuff. Busy weekend. You can walk around the floor at 3:30 on a Thursday. Anyone going out? I'm in. Yeah, I'm totally in. I'm definitely in. And then we'd go out 20 deep to a place.
Oh, I mean, that's the thing. Like that's the thing. Like you miss more is like we talked about, right? Like our firm had like literally like 400 or 500 people working at it. Like and then the other thing that like I never appreciated until I left there was just all the people that were in your life that like you come in contact with. Like, Lance and I sat in a post, right? And so people would come to us with their orders and like, you'd see a guy, and he'd be in your stock for like a week, and you'd catch up and you know everything about his family and where you're going this weekend and what's going on. And then you wouldn't see him for like 2 months. But then he'd be back in your stock like for like 3 or 4 days. Hey, how's your son doing with the lacrosse? So what's going on with your wife and that trip you're going to go on? And it was amazing how many people were like part of your life. You just never even, you never even realized how many names you knew, how many people that you knew about their families and like what was going on. And, I think back and it's like one of those things that you really, it's underappreciated maybe like, even by us, like sometimes you just got to like be in a moment like this where you're recollecting about it, like how many people you came in contact with. It was really amazing.
How about the people you met and the people you saw, right? The athletes, the politicians, the actors and actresses and dignitaries or whoever was walking
business
across
leaders,
And they used to all like, you guys used to create like a path through the floor. I remember it was like mayhem when and they'd walk through. It's almost like a little hero canyon on the floor. It was crazy.
Yeah, and during the Dick Grasso days, he was, he promoted that place. That was it was a show.
Yeah.
If a stock went public on the outside, he was coming down to the trading floor. Remember they had the scene that would be out on Broad Street? I mean, the whole display that they would do.
It really did change it. They still hang on to a little bit of that. The other thing that strikes me, that sense of community, a lot of the people working down there, and let's face it, it was mostly men at that point, changed a little bit, it's probably still the majority. They were really, a lot of them were self-made. I know, Kevin, you mentioned you had to be funny. Like you couldn't just be good at one thing. You had to be kind of extraordinary to be able to get in there.
But what was amazing was what you didn't need was an Ivy League degree to get in there. So like you talk about self-made. I mean, you literally had guys that either barely finished high school, didn't finish high school, who were multimillionaires because they had the wherewithal and the hustle and, the acumen and the street smarts to kind of function in that environment. And they created these big businesses for themselves. And I was always amazed by that and always so impressed by it. It's like you'd meet these guys and they'd have, 14 people working for them and they'd be generating, millions of dollars of revenue every year. And, they had to earn it themselves. There was something really cool about that, about the fact that like, anybody can, it was like a chip in the chair kind of thing. Like they say in poker, right? All you need is a chip in a chair, and you have a shot in the game, right? Like all you needed was an opportunity to get down there. And if you could prove yourself and if you could pick it up quickly, who knows where your career could go.
Yeah, not many opportunities like that.
The other side was camaraderie, but the comedy aspect.
Now, oh my God.
Business down there. And guys, listen, we took our business very seriously, obviously, and we worked hard. But we called it the comedic relief. If you weren't able to joke around down there and do what you had to, that's what let the air out of the stress.
Yeah.
Because of nobody was safe.
Nobody was safe ever. Nobody was safe ever. Nobody was safe ever. Yeah. And
You
forget
came in with a bad tie, bad haircut, bad suit, it was over.
yeah, bad breath, anything.
Bad breath, bad cologne. I mean,
And God forbid you walked with a limp or something like that. You'd have somebody like walking right behind you, like
doing a limp
in your
behind
face,
you.
like redoing it, like. And then Lance was one of those masters of like voices and like mannerisms. So like, if somebody like embarrassed themselves or did something stupid, he liked to do it about me a lot. And so I was a frequent target of it. But like, he'd sit there and mimic my like, my voice and my
mannerisms of somebody's walk.
Lance the best. Lance can do anyone's walk.
Master of silly walks. Like somebody would walk, I could go behind and do like the exact walk.
But like but like you talk about and like you could put the pranks up against any industry, any walk of life, anywhere. The pranks that would happen on the floor would beat any of them. It was just unbelievable. Nobody was safe.
What do you guys make of the trading today? Like, what do you make of the markets today? Does it feel the same, just sort of happening elsewhere? Or does it feel completely different from what you experienced?
I got to be honest. I don't really do a lot of trading now. I trade a little bit with like the crypto markets a little bit, which is very dangerous as well. I don't really get too crazy with it a little bit. I mean, ham and egg stuff. It's just amazing to me how issues can move around 20% in a day or 30% in a day. And it's no big deal. If we did that as specialists, I mean, we would have to deal with the company at the end of the day. They'd want to say, they'd want to know what is going on down there. Why are you not making a market? Because if you move the stock 10% in a day, that was a big deal. Either way it went.
Yeah.
Now, 20, 30%, some of these stocks move, and it just means, that's just the way it is. It's, it's the way it trades.
Yeah, I totally agree, Maggie. I think, I feel like today with the advent of the algorithm trading and kind of like, there's nobody to hold accountable for the way these things move the way that they used to be held accountable, right? And I know there's still market makers and all, and I'm sure they do a great job in their own right today and kind of providing the liquidity that they do. And listen, some of our old friends are still down there and doing it, so we know that they play an important role. But I think something's been missed as far as just the liquidity that used to be brought to the market, and also like I don't know, I feel like part of that too is just
customer
like
service. Yeah,
I think part of it is a customer service or kind of a degradation of customer service. I think also part of it is a risk factor. I don't know that people are willing to take the risks that they used to be able to take on trading desks and stuff, like, because it wasn't just the specialists. At times it would be the upstairs desk would be long.
Guys.
Yeah, they would be position traders up on the desk taking bigger positions than we ever even dreamed of, right? And so and they were providing their own sense of liquidity on the desk, and I don't know. I feel like that's kind of not in the market the way it used to. I think a lot of that is just
dying art.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it also is just the economic model has changed, right? Like they can't charge the commissions they used to be able to charge for managing orders and for trading on behalf of an investor. So it's one of those things where who we'll always think our way was better and provided more.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm sure the guy that's made his whole career as a high frequency trader would say like this is the way it's supposed to be. So
What advice would you give some folks, as we know a lot of people are home day trading, whether it's crypto, whether it's meme stocks, whether they're just trying to manage their own money, because let's face it, there's some distrust of money managers. What advice would you give to those folks? As I seem it from the traffic I see sometimes, it feels like some people think they're trading, but maybe they're just gambling. I'm not sure. Is there a difference? I don't know. What advice would you guys have?
I believe there is people that just gamble. Obviously, my best advice is do your own research. If you're not a professional in this industry, seek a professional to manage your money and have your monthly calls. That's the safest bet. At least that's how I feel about it. I want to know what my money manager is doing monthly.
Yeah, I think similarly. I think what's important, Maggie, is to know which one you fall into, right? Like, are you just gambling? Or are you doing this as an investor? And I think, the meme stocks are the perfect microcosm of that, right? Like, if you're one of these guys who was lucky enough to buy, AMC or GameStop or one of those, and you made, $1 million doing it, well, God bless you. You found the right chat group, you found the right influencer, or you found the right guy on Twitter that, helped tip you off on it. You did your own research and, off you went, But I think too many times today, it's just easier to fall into the straight gambling aspect of it. And, you're just literally rolling dice. You might as well have it on the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football or,
That's right.
Whatever it is, And I think, listen, those lines are all
Hopefully they didn't have it on the Philadelphia Eagles
right.
Monday Night Football. Let's just be clear as we're taping this, last minute upset.
But I think that's what, I think you got to really understand, like, can you afford to lose the money that you're putting into the market?
What are you willing to lose?
Yeah. Because, you just never know what's coming around that corner. That's all. You just
be
never know.
honest about what you're willing to lose, right? Somebody just said to me, everybody says I'm a long-term investor, but they can't stand any short-term loss. Like, you have to really be honest about what your risk appetite is. And I think sometimes people overestimate their ability.
Well, like, what's the goal, right? You're putting money in. Are you putting money in to retire? Are you putting money in to say, well, I'm just going to double my money and get out? Hopefully that's my threshold, or I make 30% of my money or 50% of my money. It's a very difficult thing to have a position. Like, if you're just doing a regular position in a stock and you make, 50% on your money, you say, well, where are you going to make 50%? I'm going to sell it. And then the thing just keeps going off to the races. And you're like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Look, there's no secret sauce. I can tell you that. It's research, and it's time, like, goals. I would say yearly, 5-year, 10-year, 15, 20-year goals is how I look at it now.
Did you guys feel like because you traded those stocks every day, did you feel like you got a sense of how they moved? Because a lot of people like spread it out over a lot of things too. Do you feel like you kind of can understand something better if maybe you keep some things, your trading list, a little shorter, especially if you're doing it like in your own account and having fun, not with, with your manager where you're diversifying it. But if you do want to play around, is there something to be said for being an expert in less?
100%. I think, like, whether it was Lance trading the semis, right? Lance could probably tell you more about Taiwan semi while he was trading that semi than, somebody off the street could tell you about any Dow stock, right? You knew what's going to move those markets. You knew what was going to, move those stocks, and you knew what to look out for. And listen, there was patterns too. Like, I remember there was specific patterns around Goldman Sachs around earnings. When it was going into earnings, when, day of earnings, days after earnings, like, there was specific, kind of ways that it would trade, and it would take on a different personality than it would on, non-earnings related days, So it's nuances like that you're only going to learn if you're really micro-focused on a couple of names.
Right. You just learn the personality of the stock.
Yeah.
They actually it felt like they had personalities.
I think
100%.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think. Do you feel like that experience helped you guys, just all of the experience, not only understanding the markets, but also just having gone through the process of thriving and succeeding in that really intense environment? Did that help you as you transitioned and took on these other roles? I mean, like Lance, now you run businesses. I mean, did that help you?
Yeah, well, it trained you to persevere. On the trading floor, it was, you started all the way in the back of it. For our model, you started all the way in the back of the trading post. Then you had to fight to become a backup. Then you had to fight to be a backup in a better group of stocks, say, different panels. Then you were fighting for your frontline time. Then your frontline time, you were fighting because you wanted to be in a better panel of stocks.
You want to be considered for a seat on the exchange.
You want to be considered for a seat. Right. Then you got your seat. Then you were a relief specialist. So they put you in different spots when people went to the bathroom or went on vacation. So you were always trying to earn your stripes. So persevere. That's what that place taught me.
Yeah, I think similarly, that ability to kind of fight for everything that you're going to earn and earn it legitimately is real. I think also, like, there was some tenets of what you needed to incorporate to be a good floor trader. And I think, some of those are, like we spoke about earlier, attention to detail, being able to think on your feet, being a good listener, those are all things that have, treated me well in my next career. And I think, the other thing too that I think, is maybe underappreciated or forgotten about, kind of the floor trader is that, like, your reputation was literally everything, and we used to have a saying on the floor, your word was your bond, So if I sit there and you said to me, 50,000 at the market, 50,000 at the figure, and I said, take them, that was all it needed to happen, right? That meant 50,000 shares was trading at that price. I was buying them from you. And no matter what happened, no matter if the next guy in, yelled 50,000 at the figure right after him, or, all of a sudden a rush of sellers came in, I still bought that 50,000 for you. And so, like, that was huge for us, right? Like, our word was our bond. When we stood up and we made a sale or we made a purchase, we had to live by that. If we told somebody information, we had to make sure that it was real. You couldn't trade in falsehoods and make a living on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, right? So, like, in order to kind of earn the respect of your peers and be in good standing in that community, you had to always be trustful. You had to always be true with your word. And I think, that's just good in life,
Yeah. Well, we need a lot more of that in the world. That's for sure.
Oh, God, do we ever.
Well, Lance and Kevin, this was so much fun. I'm always floored by the knowledge and the stories. And, we need to hear more of them because I think it's a really important time. And there are long threads of and the lessons from that still carry through the markets today. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Absolutely, Maggie. Thanks for having us.
Let's do it again.
We really appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
All right. Thanks.
See you,
Thanks,
Maggie.
everybody. Take care and good luck out there.
See you, fella.
Take care.